Here's a technique for shaping your fingernails. I've seen a couple of videos adopting a similar approach. I thought of this well over 20 years ago. This is my take on the approach. You're going to need a piece of 600 grade waterproof or wet and dry sandpaper. Optional but important, a smallish piece of paper. It's about half A4 or half letter size. Even more optional, a capo. You'll also want your normal nail shaping and smoothing finishing devices. Important thing to avoid when you're choosing your sandpaper, make sure that when you fold it, it doesn't crack along the edge like that. That would give you quite a poor result because the cutting surface is very uneven, very cracked. You tend to find that the case when the backing paper to the sandpaper is quite thick, and so it doesn't fold smoothly. I'll introduce the technique like this for clarity to begin with, but in the end it's important to do it in your completely normal sitting posture. I'm going to fold the sandpaper round along an edge like that, and you want to fold it fairly but not really tightly. Then it's going to go on the first string like that. Now I folded the piece of paper, wrapped it around the sixth string and put it underneath all the other strings like that. The purpose of this piece of paper is to avoid the sandpaper abrading the finish of your guitar underneath the strings. You wouldn't notice it the first few times, but believe me, because I've done it, if you use this technique a lot without using a piece of paper, you will mark the finish and you will regret that. Now I'm back in playing posture, and you can see that I've got the sandpaper resting round the first string and the protective piece of paper underneath it, underneath all of the other strings. Now I'm going to hold the piece of sandpaper on with my left hand. I'd normally hold it round like this, but then that'll get in the way of your seeing. So I'm going to hold it there, and basically the most important thing is that when you make the finger stroke on the first string, it's as much as you possibly can the most natural, normal free stroke that you'd make. There I'm doing an AMI tremolo type pattern. You can also do a few on the same finger. And what's happening is that the abrasive paper is working with the string underneath it to shape your nail. That's the essence of the technique. I would also do it on the second string and on the third string as well. Now I've reversed everything. The protective paper is around string 1, the abrasive paper is around string 6, and I make thumb strokes. And I would also put the paper on strings 5 and possibly even string 4 as well. They all have a slightly different response and will add a small, slightly different degree of shaping. Coming back to the treble strings, now what I've done is wrap the string tightly around the upper side of the first string, and I've made a gully in between the first and second strings. And now what I'm going to do is do a strong rest stroke action from the first string onto the second string. And now when we're doing a rest stroke with the thumb, again I've made a gully this time between strings 6 and 5. And I could move on to string 5 as well. The proportion of free stroke to rest stroke that you would do would be a matter for experimentation, but certainly a lot more free stroke than rest stroke. Also, you might notice I've got a capo on about halfway along the neck. It doesn't really matter. I find that if you use this technique without using the capo, it produces a slightly different shape compared with a capo on 6 or 7 as I've got it there. Obviously that shortens the string, it makes it slightly tenser, and after all, usually when you're playing you're going to be covering most of the fingerboard rather than just playing in first position, so it seems to help. Now what you'll find if you only did free stroke with this technique would be that the middle part of the ramp of the nail would be shaped quite flat, but the leading and the trailing edges of the nails would start to grow out, a bit like a pair of horns. And so it's obviously very important to make sure you file away both the leading and the trailing edges of your nail. If you do the rest stroke technique, and especially if you really kind of angle your finger to one side and then the other side, you probably find that that on its own will take away that tendency for 2 points to grow out. And overall what you'll find is if you follow the technique over a few days or weeks, your nails will grow out into a shape. A lot of people, when they do this for the first time, especially adult players, they find that it makes an immediate improvement to their sound, but you do need to keep on doing it. And also what happens is as your nail grows out into the shape, your right hand technique can subtly change to adapt to the new shape. Specifically, that what's happening is very often compared with the kind of more or less randomly chosen shape, there's a lot less resistance being given by the string, and so your right hand can move in a more relaxed, smooth, kind of creamy sort of way, and so that helps quite a lot with the relaxation of your right hand when you're playing. Don't be surprised if the first time you do this technique you're rather surprised by the shape of your A finger. If you do this technique only using free stroke, you'll find that it has a very that way type of ramp. If you do rest stroke as well, it will probably make a more rounded shape like mine. Obviously with the thumb, and apologies for the rather ugly looking repair on my thumbnail, it's not so much affecting the shape in terms of its length that away, but it is affecting the underneath profile of your nail like that, and it does make quite a big difference. Above all, just generally with your thumbnail, make sure that this side of your nail is relatively filed away, otherwise if your thumbnail is very symmetrical, it's likely to catch quite a lot, and especially if you want to be able to do rest stroke thumb, you need a lot less on that side. And using this technique, if it's an easy kind of fluent, flowing, smooth movement, then the chances are that your thumb is good for that. Having done all this, do use your normal shaping device. Here I've got a Oasis shaper, just to take away the rough edges. Make sure that you go underneath and on the top of the nail and all around the different kind of corners where you can get little bits of burr left, and do assiduously go down the different coarsenesses of whatever system that you've got to hand. Same with the thumb, of course. And there you have it. So to summarise, as it's already said on the screen, do not use this technique if you are very shortly going to be doing a really important performance, exam, audition, recital, whatever, just in case it causes a problem and you really hate it. Make sure you're doing this only when you've got plenty of time to get used to what happens and to change completely if you don't like it. Aside from that, the main thing to remember is that when you're making the finger action on the sandpaper on the string, make sure that you're playing your normal, natural stroke. If you're doing something else or some other kind of artificial movement or whatever, then you're going to be affecting the shape that the sandpaper is giving your nail. And the idea is you want to give it the most natural, most appropriate shape possible. So thank you for watching. Let me know how you get on with it. Bye for now.